with an unknown, the first reaction for individuals is to stigmatize and kind of avoid individuals with feeding tubes. But we want to make it, again, as normal process as possible. So I think that's the beauty of kind of this awareness.
We need to dismantle the stigmas around feeding tubes, not just for other people to understand that we're capable, but for us to see ourselves represented that way too.
Representation matters for the future generations. Seeing yourself represented lets you dream and achieve whatever you want to be because you see yourself being whatever you want to be.
A number of reasons for someone to get a feeding tube, but the main way to think about it is that there is something that's preventing that individual from taking in oral food orally by mouth. So this can be an example where they're not able to protect their airway. This can happen after someone's had a stroke where there's nerve damage, and so they no longer have good function in the oral pharynx area, this mouth area. And so what can happen in that case is that food can go through the windpipe into the lungs and set up a bad infection. So in that case, we do tend to move ahead with a feeding tube into the stomach. Other reasons can be a dysfunction, such as in some cases where the stomach doesn't move as it used to. We call that gastroparesis. Or sometimes, whether due to cancer or other reasons, there's a blockage, and then we have to bypass that blockage and still get nutrition for that patient. So number of reasons you can get one. So there's a number of feeding tubes out there, and the way I tend to categorize them is to really look at the entry into the body. So some tubes can be placed through the nose, and those are typically referred to as nasal tubes. Other tubes can be placed directly into the belly, and those we refer to as percutaneous tubes. The next big category and the way we define tubes is the location of the tip. So in some cases, the tip is located in the stomach. So if a tube goes through the nose into the stomach, we would call that a nasogastric tube. At other times, the tube can go with the tip being in the intestine, so past the stomach, and we usually define it by the area of that small intestine, like a nasal jejunal tube, for example, would be a tube that goes through the nose, past the stomach, and ends up in the small intestines in the jejunum. So that's how we start to categorize tubes. There's other categories which refer to the way the tube is placed. So if a gastroenterologist uses an endoscope, we will call it a percutaneous endoscopically placed gastrostomy tube or a PEG. So different ways for us to explain where the tube is, how it was placed, and how it functions.
It's just an extension of who he is. It doesn't make him any more special than anybody else. It doesn't make him any less special than anybody else. He's just Matthew. He's a typical 16-year-old kid who likes all these things, and he just has a stomach that doesn't work right.
Yeah, I might need a feeding tube to help nourish me, but if it means that I can get on with my life, and yeah, I might not feel 100% and I don't feel great, but it gives me the energy I need to spend time with friends and family and to cook and to travel. Once I wrapped my head around that and started just going with the flow, it truly made all the difference in my life.
I think that once we experience the benefits of actually getting proper nutrition, we start to feel less and less ashamed of our tubes and lines, and that allows us to go and explain it to other people in a way that's just not as scary. I found that if I don't make a big deal out of my tube, then neither will other people.
If you go to a restaurant and the waiter or waitress says, "What can I bring you?" and you say nothing, and they say, "Well, I need to bring you something." And I say, "No, I have a small atomic generator that provides all of my energy, or any other kind of a joke like that. One time when I was on a cruise ship, they said, "Oh, that's very nice of you that you've given up eating." I said, "Yes, I gave up eating for Lent." "Oh, that's so Christian of you." I try and make a joke of it. I'll show you another joke. Here's my feeding tube. Can you see the tattoo? That always gets a lot of laughs at Oley meetings.
I wish that people outside of the tube community knew that most of us, I think, actually still lead very normal, amazing lives. It's not a ball and chain, and it's not scary. It's something that helps us thrive.
I love my feeding tube because it does sustain my life. It's just an alternate way to get the nutrition that you need.
Most people eat with their mouth. Matthew eats with the help of a pump. It's not an end all. You can still do the things that you enjoy. As Matthew said, he goes skiing, he goes rock climbing, he rides a bike.
The first few years, my friends were really nervous, around me, because they didn't want anything to happen to me. Within a few years, they just got used to it and just learned that it wasn't really that much of a difference.
There's so much social camaraderie that goes around with eating with people, and it's just a major life change. And I made up my mind that I would be positive and not let this tube rob me my life. It's not about the food on the table. It's about the people around the table, the love of family and friends.
When I meet people who don't know me and I share a meal with them, they really feel uncomfortable because I'm not eating. And I tell them, please don't feel uncomfortable. I judge the quality of my dinner by the quality of the friends that I'm with and the quality of our conversations.
No matter what situation we're in, we still have a spot at the table. We're still as much a part of it as anyone else. Just because we eat differently, it doesn't change that.
My advice to someone who just got a feeding tube would be to connect with other people who have feeding tubes, get to know people who have gone through this experience, because they can lead you through it.
When I go to Oley meetings and I see all of the young kids with other people just like them, they just have such a great time because they can joke about it and be with people that have the same kinds of challenges that they do, and they just get past that. And I think that's great.
It's great to have a tube feeding community where we can receive and share advice with each other. I've learned probably more that way than I have from the medical community.
There's so much that we learn in medical school, residency, and training, but it's clearly not enough to be able to appropriately take care of patients, I think. We get most of that education from patients and consumers themselves. So I'd go to every Oley conference possible.
I'm sitting in a chair. I get home, I sit in a chair, and I looked around the room. And I thought, how lost I am. How lost I am. How am I going to deal with this? What am I going to do? I don't know anybody on a feeding tube. I began to search, and thankfully, 3 weeks later, I found the Oley Foundation.
When I saw that and I realized that there was an organization for people like me, I called and I found out that I could go to the conference that was coming up, and it was in Anaheim. And I flew out there, and that was, my awakening, the beginning of my new life.
I mean, I think of Oley as probably one of the greatest learning opportunities for me every year.
Attending my first Oley conference was life-changing. I can't believe how much access we as consumers and caregivers are given to manufacturers and home care companies. It truly gave me the opportunity to feel like I could make informed decisions on my care.
It's so great to see so many tube feeders there, meet them and their families, and we just feel a special bond with tubies.
They've helped us in the past with questions and things like that, how to present Matthew to like school and his peers to explain how Matthew is different because of his feeding tubes.